let's talk some footy in a moment. So, like North Melbourne Moons, Nick Larkey spoke yesterday. Geez, I love Nick Larkey. Like, how can you not?
Big fan.
If you're a North Melbourne supporter, like he sticks fat in 2023, signs that big contract through to 2029. He kicked nearly 80 goals in a miserable season a couple of years ago. Backs it up with nearly 50 this year. Leads from the front. Great team, man. But he's been part of a side that have won 15 games in 5 years. I mean, it has been an horrifically dark time for that football club. Horrible time.
Yes.
But they've slowly chipped away at their list and just kept adding young talent. Now, that young talent this year got a sprinkling of veteran leadership via free agency and trade. So Caleb Daniel comes across.
Loved it.
Part of a premiership. Jack Darling comes across.
I
part
love
of
it.
a premiership.
Past his best, but love it.
Luke Parker comes across. Part of a premiership.
Absolutely love it.
Now, we can debate what they're going to offer in terms of the cut and thrust of the season, but they can offer a stack at the moment around pre-season and training and guidance and all that sort of stuff, surely.
Well, particularly up forward with Darling. I mean, as I said, he's clearly past his absolute best, but he still had games last season where he could still kick you 3 or 4. He could still take the pressure off Larkin. That's the biggest one. So Zerha needs to have a big year for mine. But there's a man who's been playing virtually out of position. So he had to play as that second tall. That's not his job. He is a fantastic hybrid type forward. So he can play tall, play small. So he's your third option when the ball's coming in the air in particular. So Darling takes the pressure off him, so he can play more of his role. And obviously, it's going to take the pressure off Larkey as well, who in the end double, triple teamed because you knew where the ball was going most of the time. Now his goal output last year was low. But on the back of, he was their only option. So as a defence, where were you going?
Yeah.
You're going to go stand right in front of Larkey.
So Nick Larkey is now 26. So the footy's biological clock is ticking for him. And he spoke of where he's at, where the team is at yesterday in terms of just finally turning the corner. It's guys like Paul Curtis, Wardlaw, McKercher, obviously, Zane Dersma, Sheasel, even guys like Powell, Bailey Scott. And you mentioned already Cam Zerha needs to have a massive year. Charlie Comben showed some real signs this year as well if his body can keep behaving. So I can see them taking a pretty significant step forward next year.
I hope they do. I mean, Archer was another one, young Cooper Harvey. These guys are coming through. Cherry as their ruckman, outstanding. You pray if you're a North supporter or just even a football person. I mean, people say they like seeing their other teams down the bottom, but you actually want to see a team that's been kicked in the guts have a rise.
I think they've done their time, haven't they?
They've done their time.
And look, it's only through largely their own mismanagement that they're in this position, but they're not the only club who have made mistakes along the way. But it just looks as though now they've got their ship straightened. Everyone's rowing in the same direction as well. So Nick Larkey, I think sometimes you just need affirmation, don't you? You need reassurance that you are in fact heading along the right path. And the big Suvalaki said he'd got that from those that trio of veterans that have joined the club.
And also you throw in, like, Davies Uniac is going to be a big talking point for this football club in the next season.
Will he really resign?
Luke, please stay. I can honestly see this club starting to go, and it took us 8 years from the moment I walked through the door at Geelong and Bomber took over. It took us 8 years to win a premiership. It doesn't just happen overnight. Now, I know you guys have been, as I said, kicked in the guts for a long, long time. But I can promise you, if you stay around and you start to win, those wins will be 1,000 times more sweeter.
Yeah, I can relate.
1,000 times.
You can relate to that. This is a bit more from Nick Larkey yesterday about the pre-season thus far. So 3 wins this year, 3 wins the year before that, 2 wins the year before that, 4 wins the year before that, 3 wins the year before that, before you got to go all the way back to 2019 when they got into double figures. They were 10 and 12 on that season. So, geez, they're coming from a long, long way back. But you'd love to see a campaign where they can get themselves to 8 or 9 wins, I reckon, would be an amazing...
it'd be fantastic.
Be an amazing result.
We know, and from a coaching point of view, clearly last year was a horror one for the coach with everything that was going on off-field. You got one of the greatest coaches of all time. So hopefully now things are just settled and everyone can just go in the one direction and get this club back up. And it is a great club. I still have great memories of that footy club. I love it. I'd love to see them rising back up that ladder very quickly because the players do deserve it. I mean, players and the supporters in particular, but the players, when you've been around for that long and, as I said, you keep getting kicked poor season after poor season, you sing the song once, twice, 3 times a year. It is a tough workplace when you're going through that year after year.
I reckon it's amazing that Larky re-signed. It might be one of the most amazing re-signings.
Well, they probably had every right to look elsewhere.
Probably.
Every right.
Like he's re-signed until 2029 on a team.
I'm a big advocate. When you get drafted to a football club, it is their job and their duty to make sure that by the time you finish, you've played finals. Now, right now for Larky and Zerha and Davies Uniacke and Simpkin, they're probably thinking, are we ever going to play finals? But I can promise you, if everything gets right and done right, it can turn like that.
The renowned high-performance expert was involved in 4 premierships in his 26 years working at Essendon, Port Adelaide, most notably Hawthorn, and most recently Carlton, which he stepped away from at season's end following a 6-year stint. And it's that time of the year, isn't it? In his not-so-old life, Andrew would be right now in the thick of it preparing an AFL team for the rigours of a new season. Instead, and we're wrapped with this, he's here with us, which is great. Andrew Russell, welcome to SEN.
Hey, Sam, Cam, how are you?
Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
We are beautiful, mate. How are you? You better set the scene for us. I mean, what are you up to now? What does this new chapter in your life look like now that you're not blowing the whistle down at Icon Park?
Yeah, no, look, it's exciting times. I've had some amazing experiences the last 26 years, and to be honest, the last 6 or 8 weeks has been awesome to spend time with family and give a little bit back there, which has been awesome. I've travelled a bit. I've been in the US. I saw my son. He's at Mizzou, Finn over there at college, and I went to the LA Chargers, and I spent some time with the On Athletic Club in Boulder in Colorado, which is one of the best running groups in the world right now. So that was awesome. And then I've been renovating a house. So and
Jeepers.
Building building my business model I'm going to launch in 2025. So there's plenty happening.
Well, do you want to explain what that business might be, Andrew, please?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to basically use the last 26 years of working in high performance and using high performance principles to apply to anyone in their life. So an athlete, a corporate executive, a teacher, anyone, any human that's wanting to be the best version of themselves. We apply those high performance principles from athletes use, and we apply it to their life, and everyone's got a very unique setup. The way that they, from the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed, how do you be your best version? Which is really exciting. A few years ago now, I explored the option. I was going to travel the world and write a book. Michael Gordon was going to write a book with me. We were going to visit all the best athletes, talk to all the best athletes in the world, and basically say, well, what is it that makes you elite? Why are you better than everyone else? So that's where this started. I've been working on this for my whole life, really, but especially the last 10 years I've been working on these principles of living that anyone can apply, to be great at whatever you want to be great at, because we're all trying to be great at something, in our lives. So whether you're an athlete or not, same principles apply. It's pretty exciting.
So, Andrew, in the role that you just left behind, and that sounds magnificent what you've moved on to, how did you handle it? Because from the outside looking in, it's almost like you guys are either the secret weapon and the team's winning because you've done this or done that, or you're the problem because their injury list is ballooned and look at all the soft tissue injuries. So how did you find it? It seemed as though you were either the problem or the cure and you were never in between.
Well, it's very true. Well, I think most people in the role are invisible, to be honest, over the years. I think there's so many great people in the AFL doing good things in that high-performance space. And you're right, most of the time they're invisible. When the team wins, the coach gets the credit, as they should. They're driving the ship. And if things don't go well, then, often the high-performance guy can be put under the pump. So, I think when you're in it, you understand it, you're okay with it. There's a fair bit of disassociation. You've just got to get on with it. You have to, move on as quickly as you can. And you're working with a team of people that are working really hard to solve issues, all the time. But it's a relentless part of the industry, actually, because it's the one part of the industry that doesn't stop because the athlete never stops. So, coaches finish the year, they go on, they can switch off a little bit, but you've always got an injury list. You've always got athletes training. They might have 2 weeks after the season where they don't train, and then the next 6, 7, 8 weeks they're all training. They're just not training at the club. So it's all day, every day. I think I had 1 day off, last year, Christmas Day, where there wasn't something to do with the footy club in terms of someone's body, mind, because you're working with the athlete's mind more than their bodies. That's actually what takes the time, is that complete total investment in the athlete, the person, and their lives. So beyond them. So there's lots of work that people are doing in AFL clubs, and they're working with both the athlete, but beyond that, there's a whole group of people as well that you need to manage. So there's hundreds and hundreds of people that you're influencing directly, when you're involved in an AFL club, which is why we all do it.
So, Andrew, just talk about, I guess, how far the players have come along before pre-season starts. So you talk about the mind there. See, my mind was, Sammy, pre-season is for me to get fit. So I'll have the off-season. I'm going to have a crack in the off-season. But how much now have players, I guess, matured in that off-season, Andrew, that they come back almost ready, or they pretty much are. They're ready to go from day one?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. I remember years ago you got a real advantage in the off-season because some clubs and some players weren't taking it seriously enough. So if you could motivate your playing group and get them to understand how important it was, you had an advantage. Day one of pre-season, you were ahead of the rest of the competition, which we sold hard, in the early days, Port Adelaide and Hawthorn. We believe that we're ahead because we had the majority of the list already in amazing shape, which really means that you can get into your football program quicker.
Yeah.
You're having to get guys into shape physically in good general fitness, then you can't do a high performance or a high intensity football program. So now the standards have lifted. I think social media has played a real role in that because they're all seeing what everyone else is doing. They're watching them travel around the world. They're seeing them trying new things, or, there's lots of curious athletes out there, which is great. And so I think there's a real fear mentality of, shit, if I don't do the work, I'm going to be in trouble here. So I think it's more around the comparison, because we're all comparing ourselves to others the whole time. That comparison theory, I think, because we're very aware of what's going on now, is ever present. And, it just means that, I think a lot of football programs now, they're getting into ball program and they're doing gameplay in the first week back, for instance. Teams are doing that now. So they're actually practicing strategy and the way they're moving the ball and getting that team connection almost from day one of pre-season, whereas that used to be for a lot of teams a bit more, in January. And some teams didn't do a lot of ball work before Christmas, for instance, in the past, and they focused on the physical side. So, but, even last year, so our program last year at Carlton, we went so far one way, we had 87% of our pre-season, 80% of our total load was in our ball program and 13% was in the conditioning, from pure conditioning. Now, when I started at Port Adelaide, I would say we were 70% conditioning and 30% skills-based program when I started at Port Adelaide. And Mark Williams and Phil Walsh just, completely backed me in those days and said, all right, well, how are we going to do this? Now, the game's changed a bit. It's become more defensive, obviously. So those structures behind the ball, I think, have been, it's a lot harder it's harder to coach. It was a simpler game. So, get high skill level, get them well conditioned. If you've got a good group of athletes, they can really pop. And that's what happened at Port Adelaide. We got super, super fit. As in my early days, we had 10 weeks before Christmas, my first season there. Like, we were...
They were the good old days. You started in October.
I remember, I think we beat Essendon in that there. We beat Essendon by 70 points in a pre-season game, and they were the premiers from the year before. And that was we were just in unbelievable physical condition because we'd just done more than everyone else for longer because, everyone else had gone through the finals and they hadn't at that stage. So, look, it's a real balancing act, and it continues to be a challenge for every club of how much you train working on the physical side and how much you work on the tactical and the technical side of the game.
Andrew Russell's with us. Andrew, just specifics for a moment. Like, your time at the Blues did coincide with an enormous change in fortunes at that club. Like, you arrived 2018, so a really low ebb. But now that club is a top four aspirant, of course, and they would have bigger aims than that, I'm sure. Some of the successes, like Charlie Curnow, you were able to find an answer for with his knee. But the injury list this year, the soft tissues and the like, why was that, and how difficult was that for you to navigate in your position?
Look, it was challenging on a couple of fronts. Look, there's an element, and a lot of Carlton's issues with injuries are going to be resolved because list management has made decisions on some players. So some of those players who in the past have been a bit fragile and haven't been able to handle the loads of big loads, that they've moved on, or they've decided to move on, or whatever. So even without anything changing, if you just did the same program, then it'll be a very normal injury list next year based on those players that have left the club to start with. So that's the first thing. I mean, a lot of the guys with injuries actually came from other environments versus the guys that we developed ourselves. And there was a little bit as well for me, like the leadership structure that Carlton set up meant that I actually didn't have a huge influence over a lot of those issues. I wasn't involved in a lot of the rehab of a lot of these players. So once I got in, which is the way the club set it up. So that was a bit, disappointing that I couldn't have more of an influence on some of those guys. But I was the one in the hot seat. I was the one that sort of, copped some of the criticism for it. But so in the end, I focused on the healthy group, working with Vossi, and working with Ash and working with the coaches on that healthy group, because we had a healthy group that was in great shape as well. We really did, and that sort of got glossed over a bit. Is we actually had a lot of guys play a lot of footy last year and play really, really good footy. So I mean, and obviously Cripple was the top of the pops with that in terms of how consistent he was, over the season.
So if you had greater autonomy, like if you had your time over again, you would, and I'm sure you did at the time, but you'd push for greater control, particularly around players coming back from injury. Am I listening to you correctly there?
Look, the structure was changed in my time there, so and it wasn't what the structure was throughout the majority of my career. That's just how it happened. So, I had, my time at Port Adelaide and Hawthorn, and early Carlton, the leadership structure was different. So, I probably would have pushed a bit harder in that space if I had my time again, for sure.
Andrew, we've got a lot of, obviously, people listening and wanting to know about over the Christmas break, sleep. Obviously, there's going to be a little
parties,
a little bit of alcohol taken and all of these type of things. But what's the healthiest way to get through, I guess, this Christmas period?
Finger food diet, Moons. We love those.
Wow. Look, it's a pretty unique time of the year, isn't it? Because you get, you've got time, as in a lot of people aren't working. So, the choices, you've got a choice to make, as in how do you want to spend that 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever you get off. And probably a couple of things is it's actually a really good time to change something in your life, change a habit, improve a habit, something like that. So things like, if you want to change something in your life, the easiest time to do that or build a new habit is early in the day. There's this thing called limbic friction that happens, and what that means is that it's harder as the day goes on, all right? You become less motivated because hormonally things change. So early in the day, you've got adrenaline, you've got dopamine, you've got cortisol higher. From a brain perspective, that drives everything, and it's easier to develop a new habit early in the day. Things like sleep, like sleep, everyone sort of talks about it, but what is it that you got to do? Like, try and, get up within an hour and go to sleep within an hour. And then if you have a big night, you have a late night, things pop up in life, then don't sleep in all day. It's the worst thing you can possibly do is actually sleep in for 3 or 4 hours after your normal wake-up time. So, when we travelled to Perth, we came home in the red eye many times, and we had great success of performing the next week based on, you almost lose a night's sleep and you spend the next 3 or 4 nights getting that sleep back. So you get home at, we got home at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. off these red eye flights from Perth, and then the players would go to bed for 3 hours, and then get up and then maybe have an hour at lunchtime, sleep, and then try and go to bed an hour early the next night. So it's a way of reducing jet lag. Things like diet, going for a walk after dinner, reduces your blood glucose level quite significantly now, the studies are showing. So it's a very simple way. Have some food, get up and about, go for a walk. Even 10 minutes of walking after dinner will reduce your blood glucose, which will then take into your sleep, and then you'll wake up with lower blood glucose as well. It's a great time to work on yourself. It really is. And, if we all want to be great in our work and in our family life and all that, we've got to get ourselves right first, before we can actually influence others. So it is a time. It's also a time for curiosity and creativity, and often a lot of us are in a new environment, and whenever you change your environment, it's the best time to learn new things. And it's also the best time to create new habits is by changing your environment. So we have a brain association with being in a certain environment, and it's very hard to change our routine and ways of doing things when we're at home doing what we normally do, because our brain expects I get up and then I have a coffee, I then have my breakfast, we're operating on autopilot. Our subconscious completely drives our lives. So that's why changing the environment, being somewhere else, has a great effect on your brain, and then you can actually do new things and create new things more easily.
Andrew, great to chat. Really appreciate you taking time out of your morning to join us. I find your line of work absolutely fascinating. Good luck with the reno and the business that you're setting up. Sounds fascinating. We appreciate it.
No, thanks, boys. I look forward to launching it in 25 and helping as many people as I can. So all good, and all the best. All the best. Have a great Christmas, you guys.